What's up, guys, and thank you all for watching this edition of the Uncommitted podcast. We are on episode 5. I'm your host, EJ Stewart. I'm joined by Kendall. We got a lot to talk about on today's show. We got some big commitments from some big 5-star top 10 recruits, Kennedy Chandler and Paolo Banchero. We now know where they'll be headed next fall. These guys are 2 top 2021 recruits, so we'll talk about that. Also, some more trouble for LSU. It seems like the vultures are circling and the walls are closing in on Will Wade. We'll give you guys the latest update on the situation with their potential recruiting violations, and the hammer that may be coming on them shortly. And it seems like it's a monthly occurrence as we do this podcast, man. Kentucky, a lot of moving, shifting parts, new commitments, players maybe that were leaning Kentucky, maybe leaning elsewhere, new members of the coaching staff. So we're gonna break that all down. It should be a good podcast. Kendall is my co-host. And Kendall, we knew we were going to talk about Will Wade today and the LSU stuff, and you pointed me to The Scheme, which is an HBO documentary on Christian Dawkins, who was the center of the FBI investigation into college basketball bribery and corruption, though the documentary does a very good job of making it clear that he probably wasn't the big fish that they were looking for. I got just 3 words, man. Free Christian Dawkins. I mean, this situation was a setup. It is. I don't want smoke with the FBI, but what happened to that young man was foul. I suggest anybody who has not seen The Scheme. I know it's 2 hours. I'll be honest. I texted Kendall when I saw it was 2 hours. I almost said I'll do this another time. But for whatever reason, I decided to, I'm going to stick it out, and I'll see. Maybe I'll watch half of it and maybe watch the rest of it before we do the pod. I was glued for the 2 hours of this guy's story. Movie, it's a great documentary. Shout out to HBO and shout out to whoever produced and directed that. Apologies, I don't have you off the top of my head. It was remarkable. I mean, if you love college basketball and you love this recruiting stuff and you're into like the kind of nitty gritty stuff that goes on, the grimy stuff that goes on, it's a great kind of inside look at that situation and what happens with these schools and these high big time recruitments. But Christian Dawkins, man, it sucks because he's just been like just dragged through the mud as some crazy shadowy, suspicious kind of figure, and it's just corny. It's terrible, and I just feel so bad for him. I hope that he gets off. I know he's appealing his case. They got like 7 of the 10 charges. They were acquitted on them, so I'm happy for him for that. Especially the one that they were trying to give 200 years on one. Like, it's just like nonsense. But
right.
It was crazy to me how like they tried to pin the idea of paying the coaches being the bribery and like the scheme part of it, because paying like the players or the families, as Christian Dawkins normally did business, there's no illegality in there. And to see kind of how these FBI people kept pushing him to do the illegal action in their eyes that he didn't want to do because he thought it just didn't make sense. It was crazy.
It just doesn't help us. That was the funniest part of the documentary, was that like Dawkins like didn't understand what this guy was doing. He's like, this guy is like a chump. This guy doesn't.
Yeah, he's just saying this guy Jeff is an idiot. Like, he has all this money, he's just blowing it.
That was the most ridiculous thing. This guy's an idiot. Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a funny documentary in that regard. Obviously, like you say, illuminating in terms of what goes on behind the scenes with some of these college basketball cases. And obviously, we're going to talk about Will Wade and probably a little bit of Sean Miller, but like that, like the fact that those guys still have jobs is still mind-boggling.
Yeah, Sean Miller, man, I just don't. I mean, we'll get to Wade, but Sean Miller, like, I just don't understand. I understand. We've talked about it on the New Generation podcast, a New Generation Sports Talk podcast. And I think that there's just kind of an apathy towards like this kind of like quote unquote corruption. And I thought it was kind of cool that Christian at one point says, like, I don't think that people who pay players are bad people. I think they're good people because these people should be getting paid. Like, I think it's bad that the people who say I'm not going to pay anybody, which is a very unique perspective. And I kind of like that he put that.
It's wild.
Like, despite the fact that all these people have kind of, painted him as a bad guy. Like, the Wades and the Sean Millers of the world have kind of left him out there to be painted as this crazy villain, and he's even here, even with facing prison time, being like, I don't think that people who do what they do are bad people.
It's wild how much the FBI looked at Rick Pitino as like the kingpin of all this, like a mob boss. Like he
Yeah,
was the guy.
they really wanted to like throw Rick. They wanted Rick Pitino under the jail. It was very clear in the
They
documentary.
wanted him behind bars.
Yeah, they wanted him under the jail, gone for years, for a long time. I don't know why. To me, like, there's got to be some other thing that's going on as to why they were so interested in Rick Pitino. But this documentary also made it nuts that anybody would hire him. Like, to me, I don't know about you, Ken. I know you said that, somebody will hire Rick Pitino, and we've gone back and forth about on this podcast.
Yeah.
Or not this podcast, but on our Sports Talk podcast, which y'all should check out, by the way. SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all good stuff. Not just college basketball, but NBA, NFL stuff. But, like, this to me makes it even crazier that someone hired Rick Pitino. Because the feds were after him. And now, look, it looks like the feds are kind of backed off and they don't really want the smoke anymore because they've been embarrassed. But the idea that Ion was like, I don't care, we're still going to hire him, I'm just like, wow, that takes some hubris to me.
Yeah. Well, look, Iona, they haven't been in the best spot. Tim Cluse did a great job with that program, but they kind of, plateaued a little bit. So they were desperate. So it takes a desperate program and a desperate AD to hire Rick Pitino, and that's what we saw.
Well, look, man, shout out to Christian Dawkins. Hope he wins this appeal. He doesn't face any jail time. And also that dude, the white dude who like was facing 70 years, who was like their informant.
Oh, the guy, Murray something or whatever his name was.
I forgot what his name was. He had the weird haircut, and that guy, he like stole
something Blazer.
Yeah,
right?
Marty Blazer. Marty Blazer. He sounds like a freaking like Madden character, like your agent in Madden when you're like my player or whatever. He doesn't even look like a real person. Like the characters that were involved in this story were wild to me. But the guy who like stole millions and millions of dollars from all these investors for years that they used to get Christian Dawkins on some nonsense charges, and he got probation and no jail time. I mean,
this guy got no jail time just to turn over Christian Dawkins.
Only in America is all I can say about that, man. Only in America. Anyway, let's get to the show, man. Let's get to the recruiting stuff we got to talk about. So, obviously, one of the big stories came out this past month. A lot of these commitments were very recent. Two of the top high school seniors in the country announced they'll be heading for college in the fall. Number 1 ranked point guard Kennedy Chandler announced his commitment to the University of Tennessee. The Memphis native told ESPN he was looking for a school that where he could develop a strong family atmosphere and a strong connection and bond to a head coach. Chandler says he believes he's found that in Rick Barnes and the Volunteers. He's the highest ranked player to commit to Tennessee since Tobias Harris in 2007 and Scotty Hopson in 2008. So shout out to the Volunteer fans who remember those names. You should know Tobias Harris. He's in the NBA. Obviously, Scotty Hopson. That's a little bit of a pull there.
Scotty Hopson coming out of high school. People that don't
Scotty Hopson had game, man.
And he was good.
He was good, yeah. We're putting respect on Scotty Hopkins' name. Yeah. Hopson's name. He could ball.
He kind of fell. He was one of the guys that fell into a situation where like he didn't go to a one and done factory, so like because of that, he kind of fit as a part of Bruce Pearl's schemes. And sometimes it happens to guys, and he just never really developed. I think that was the issue. That he got to Tennessee and was there for I believe 3 years, but it might have been 3 or 4, but never really developed. But that guy could play, man. And the hype coming into Tennessee, that's why we see Kennedy Chandler as the best guy since Scotty Hopson and Tobias Harris. But he was a way back machine there.
Yeah, he was good. Shout out to Scotty Hopson. Of course, shout out to Tobias Harris, who I know because I played AAU ball with him when I was a 12-year-old, 11-year-old. Also, this past month, Paolo Banchero, a forward out of Seattle, announced that he would be joining the Brotherhood, committing to the Duke Blue Devils after a very hotly contested recruitment that included Tennessee, which a lot of people thought that Chandler and Banchero would be maybe a package deal. That obviously did not work out. Gonzaga, Washington, Arizona, and Kentucky were also involved in that recruitment. Banchero, who was ranked the number 3 player in most recruiting databases for the 2021 class, is the second top 10 commit to join the Blue Devils alongside AJ Griffin. So, Kendall, were you surprised by either of these commitments, and how do you think this kind of sets the recruiting landscape for 2021 as we stand here today?
Yeah, these were interesting. I mean, look, the Kennedy Chandler one. If you would have told me in January, that he was headed to Tennessee, I would have been slightly surprised. I think a lot of people thought Duke was out in front for Kennedy Chandler, and that Kentucky and Tennessee were kind of on the rear. I don't know what Duke's really. I don't know where their thing is at in terms of the point guard position. In the 2021 class, I think part of me thinks that they don't think that they have a one and done point guard on the roster right now, and so Jeremy Roach, who's coming in next year, might be a guy that's a 2-year guy, so they may not feel the priority to recruit a 5-star point guard. It's crazy now that's what we're talking about with Duke, because they got to recruit a 5-star point guard every year. I mean, before it was like you had to recruit a 5-star point guard every 3 years for Duke. Now it's become every year. But so I think as the situation develops, and I think they kind of realize we don't need a 5-star necessarily. We can bring in a kind of a more developmental point guard prospect, or we could wait till 2022. It became clear that Kennedy Chandler was now probably headed to Tennessee, because Kentucky also has a lot of different priorities, and we'll talk about Kentucky and their point guard situation later in the podcast. But so once that happened, the Tennessee thing in recent months is not much of a surprise. And Memphis was in there a little bit. Kennedy Chandler played for Team Penny back in the day, so there was a connection there. But it never really felt like Penny Hardaway prioritized Kennedy Chandler the way he has with other guys. I don't know if that's because Kennedy Chandler, he knew that he wasn't going to get him, or if that was because there was some reason why he wasn't interested in Kennedy Chandler. But for whatever reason, no one really ever thought Kennedy Chandler was Memphis bound. For a guy, 5-star point guard, arguably the best point guard in the country coming out of Memphis. So that one, not a shock. Shout out to Rick Barnes. Shout out to Kim English, an assistant, former Missouri great.
Missouri, yeah.
Yeah, who really closed the deal on this Kennedy Chandler recruitment. But the Banchero one, that's the one that's the shock. I mean, it's not the Zion commitment, because the Zion commitment is still the biggest shock in college basketball recruiting history in the last decade, in terms of when it happened, the impact it had, and like the unlikelihood, or the unlikeliness that it was going to happen. This Banchero situation, though, is very, very surprising. When you look at the crystal balls, they were all Washington, all Kentucky. I think primarily Kentucky. And what some people also thought Tennessee was going to be there with a package deal, like you said. And Duke wasn't really in the picture. They were there. They wanted Banchero, obviously, but it was similar to Zion. They were third or fourth in the race. And really, a lot of people thought, well, I mean, yeah, I guess Duke can get back in the race if they get Kennedy Chandler, who at one point Kennedy Chandler said that Duke was his dream school. So you feel like, all right, once Kennedy Chandler's going to Tennessee, well, I mean, Duke, now they got to really regroup, because they don't get Kennedy Chandler. They're probably not getting Banchero. Where is their recruiting class at now? Obviously they have Adrian Griffin Jr., AJ Griffin committed, who's a 5-star top 10 guy in the country out of New Jersey, who some people think could be the number one pick in the draft when he comes out. But, now you add Banchero, and what was a shocking commitment. No one knew he was committing. A shocking commitment out of nowhere. A kid goes without making any official visits in his senior year, commits to Duke. It really shows you that people thought when Jeff Capel left Duke that, all right, yeah, Jeff Capel helped against Zion and Barrett and Reddish, but we saw the next year the recruiting class looked like it was starting to slip a little bit. Then they got Matthew Hurt and Vernon Carey and those guys, and Cassius Stanley, and it was like, all right, maybe Duke's fine, but still not Zion, Barrett, Reddish. This recruiting class coming in this year, certainly not Zion, Barrett, Reddish. Zion, Barrett, Reddish. It has depth, but no A1 talent, I think, coming in for Duke this upcoming season. But now you bring in AJ Griffin, you bring in Paolo Banchero, two guys that are going to be competing to be the number one pick in the draft in 2022. And now, I mean, you're cooking with gas. Not to mention Patrick Baldwin, kid out of Wisconsin, who's a top 5 player in the country, also seems to be a Duke lean, along with Kentucky and Wisconsin-Milwaukee, of all schools, because that's where his dad coaches, Pat Baldwin Sr. So that would be an interesting recruitment that we will be following on this show. But no, this is a huge shock. And look, again, it shows you that the mighty haven't fallen as much as people thought. And John Shire's still there, even though there's some flux about what's happening with Nolan Smith. Well, now he could be up for some other jobs, which we'll eventually talk about in the show probably. We'll see. But regardless, as long as Coach K is there, and as long as they still have a strong assistant staff around Coach K, they're still going to get the 5 stars. This was a major, major message to the rest of college basketball that we can go, if we're Duke, and we can still get a kid out of Seattle as a 5-star top 3 player in the country that every school in the country wants to. Again, tough blow to Washington, who I think they thought they had a chance at Banchero. I think Gonzaga thought they had a chance at Banchero. Again, local schools over there, and at Kentucky, I think realized as time went on it was going to be a little bit more of a long shot, and I think Tennessee, it was a swing for the fences to hope they can get Kennedy Chandler and or Banchero. They were going to certainly be fine with one or the other, and they got Chandler, and I think they're very pleased with that. You can't expect Tennessee to get a 5-star top 3 kid out of Seattle, but Duke, major message.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the Banchero thing, I wasn't stunned only because it's Duke, and Duke has done this before, as you mentioned, with these kind of recruits that you're kind of not really eyeing at being a Duke commit. All of a sudden, they're with the Blue Devils. So Banchero fit the bill for a lot of those aspects you look at in the Dookie. So that part wasn't surprising as much. I agree. I do think it is a blow for particularly Washington. I thought Mike Hopkins, when he got to UW, had some really strong momentum there. I'm not saying his momentum is over, but they had a really rough year last year. After bringing in a
5-star.
Yes, after bringing in an excellent recruiting class, and I do wonder if part of Banchero's apprehension was seeing how much they flopped last year as a team with 2 big time freshman recruits, 2 guys that were looked at as potential lottery picks that probably won't be in the lottery now. That I think may play the factor. And then UK, I mean, we've talked about the Seattle pipeline to UK on this show a lot, and for Duke to kind of come in and they I can't think of a Seattle player that's ever went to Duke. I'm not saying it's never happened, but I can't think of any high profile guy. So this is not
an NBA guy.
Yeah, this is K and that staff kind of fish out of water, plucking one of the best kids to come out of there in a really long time. Shout out to Duke, another amazing recruitment there. In terms of the Chandler commitment, man, Rick Barnes, the momentum continues. Like it's funny because I think we argued on the show. I think in the other podcast you talked about when they hired Barnes. I thought it was a great hire, and you were kind of like, I don't think so. I don't even know if I expected he would be this strong in the recruiting trail and this strong as a coach for Tennessee this quickly. But Nabin Chandler, I mean, who's just a lightning quick guard, can get to the hole. He said that Barnes sees him kind of like TJ Ford, and I kind of see some of the similarities as well. That's gonna be fun to see how he uses him.
Right, and so one thing on the Rick Barnes thing, this kind of reminds me of what Mac Brown is doing in North Carolina, where it's like people kind of roll their eyes at all and retread coach who won at Texas, ironically but he isn't going to be able to do anything at this, for North Carolina basketball school, Tennessee football school, and has really, made their presence felt on the recruiting trail, and will start. And Barnes has already won at a high level. Right, Mac Brown will probably start winning at a high level this season. But with Kennedy Chandler, what's interesting is he's a top 10 player in the country. I don't know if he's a one and done point guard. And that's interesting because when you look at the one-and-done point guards that we've seen since the one-and-done era, since 2006, 2007, we haven't seen point guards of his profile, the floor general, game manager kind of point guards.
Yeah, 6-foot point guard. Yeah.
One and done. Like we've seen those guys be McDonald's All-Americans all the time. Every year there's a point guard like that. It's a McDonald's All-American. Typically those guys stay multiple years. Tyler Ulis, very good, very, very, very good point guard. In the NBA, I'm not saying Kenny Chandler's not an NBA player. He'll be in the NBA, certainly. Jalen Brunson was another McDonald's All-American guy, but, typically the one-and-done point guards are the guys with elite physical profiles, or just an elite skill level like Trae Young, like guys who are just electric with their scoring ability. Kennedy Chandler doesn't really feel like that, but I mean, look, maybe he is. Like I guess some people thought Darius Garland was also in that mold, and Darius Garland had way more pop scoring wise than I think people expected coming into college. Not that people didn't know, but and he only played 5 games. But I think Darius Garland was also helped by going to a school in Vanderbilt that allowed him to just be the guy. And Kennedy Chandler will be going into a semi-similar situation. Obviously, we'll see what happens with Jaden Springer this season, whether or not he comes back and plays with Kennedy Chandler. Last year they've had him in All-American the last 3 seasons. So Josiah James the year prior to that, who will be playing with Jaden Springer this year. We'll see what kind of talent base they have there at Tennessee. They've been recruiting extremely well over the last 2 or 3 years. They've had multiple top 5 classes now. So we'll see. Is he going to be on a team that's pretty stacked where he's got to kind of run the team a little bit, or is it going to be his full reign? That'll be the question. But he's probably a guy that, to me, projects as a 2 or 3 year college player, which is best case scenario for Barnes. You bring in a guy. Sometimes these teams like Washington with Markelle Fultz, they bring in a 5-star point guard, and he may help you for 1 year, but what does that do for you as a program? If you're not going to, win,
especially if you don't win a national championship or make a big run in the tournament.
Yeah. But now, if you have that guy in your program for 2 to 3 years, and you could build around him, which I think you can with Kennedy Chandler. Now, like you saw with Villanova with Jalen Brunson, you can build a championship team around that guy. So, yeah, Tennessee's going to be really dangerous. What do you think of Banchero as a prospect?
Oh, I think Banchero can play. I think
best player in the country. You
possibly.
have Holmgren also in that conversation.
Yeah, Holmgren's really good, but he's still kind of a
project.
Yeah, we've talked about it. I think maybe in the last 1 or 2 episodes ago. Like, I think that he's still kind of figuring out who he is as a player. He has a whole year of development and strength training and all that stuff to get his body right, and he may find who he is, his freshman year. So which is why he's ranked so high.
Plenty of times, guys that had holes in high school, by the time they got to college, it's like, wow, this guy, like Zion.
Zion. Zion was not looked at as the top guy, but that year of development and in that offseason of training with Duke, and he was the guy. That's all it took. So, I could see it both. I can see that with Holmgren as well. So I don't want to discount him, but I mean Banchero is really good. Again, he's to me like your modern 4-man. In terms of when you look at the NBA guys and guys who can do multiple things,
he's modern and old at the same time. Like he can play back to the basket like your Karl Malone, like power forward, or your guy that can play with his back to the basket. But he can also be your face-up 4-man or even 5-man, like you said, in a more modern NBA style. For college basketball, I think he's the best prospect coming into college basketball next year. Chet Holmgren, I think, still projects as the best NBA prospect because of what he gives you on the defensive end. And Banchero being kind of limited physically in terms of his athleticism and his size is a little bit of a question mark. But the skill level and the strength, he seems like the best player right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think that skill level, it's just through the roof for a guy his size. And I'm curious, what this means for Patrick Baldwin, who also, similar, length. And, are they...
And Adrian Griffin, like I said, that's now 3 guys in that 6... It's kind of like the Zion situation.
Yeah, exactly. It looks very similar. Yeah.
Physical profile. They play different positions, but, you're going to have all 3 of these guys, 3 forwards?
They might.
But... But Coach K has the blueprint. The question is, will any of those guys look at what happened with Zion and say, look, I could be Zion, which is great, but I could also be Reddish.
Cam Reddish, right.
Well, I want to be Cam Reddish and then go from a top 3 guy to being the number 10 pick in the draft for the sake of helping the other 2 guys. And that would be the question. The one thing you mentioned, we talk about Coach K in Seattle. And I thought about what Coach K player. First of all, I thought about which player Paolo Banchero reminded me of. And then I thought of a guy that I also realized also went to Duke. and also was from the Pacific Northwest. I don't know if you know what I'm thinking of.
No, I have no idea.
Carlos Boozer.
Ah, okay.
You feel like Carlos Boozer, that could have been a part of the recruiting pitch. Like, look, I coach Carlos Boozer, a guy from Alaska, not from Seattle, obviously, but very, very far from Seattle, obviously, but still
on the same coast.
Yeah, exactly. On the same coast, people. I'm sure people from Alaska probably are in Seattle quite a bit, and vice versa. But that's an interesting comp for Paolo Banchero, and I think it's an interesting recruiting pitch if that is indeed the comparison. Just like I think Duke was very heavy on Isaiah Stewart, and they probably used the Elton Brand recruiting pitch on Isaiah Stewart. I think it didn't work going to Washington, but I feel like they probably used that with Banchero with Carlos Boozer. And probably Elton. Well, they probably threw that out there as well. But
yeah, shout out to Carlos Boozer also, who is I think an underrated Dookie and an underrated pro. Actually, we kind of make fun of him because of the hair situation and him yelling after barely being touched on an and one. But Carlos Boozer, multiple time All-Star, he was a good player. Let's shift focus now and move to a tough situation happening down south where LSU could be in hot water at the ESPN learned this past week that the NCAA has determined the basketball program offered impermissible benefits to 11 potential recruits and the people around them. The NCAA school says the school offered, arranged, and delivered on benefits that included cash payments. In referring to the case to the independent accountability resolution process, which handles complex cases such as this, the NCAA said head coach Will Wade's, quote, underlying actions give rise to this case, and his tactics during the investigation have delayed resolution dramatically. He's employed in a leadership position at LSU, yet the institution has been unable to secure his full cooperation and is accountable for his behavior. Wade was briefly suspended following that Christian Dawkins scandal that we talked about at the top of the show, but since then has been reinstated and maintains he has broken no rules. Kendall, how did this all end up, and what is your take on this situation happening down in Louisiana?
Look, I mean, it's funny because Trendon Watford, guy who seemingly was going to be a one-and-done guy at LSU, decided actually to Baton Rouge as well as Javonte Smart. I think probably because they realized they probably watched the scheme and were like, wait, we get paid more at LSU than we do at the D League. So why would I go enter the draft, be a second-round pick, be in the D League when I can get paid more at LSU? No, I mean, look, this is not good. What part of this is fact? Like, is any of this, or is this all reports? Because obviously, the LSU fans and the Arizona fans are always going to be like, but this is anonymous sources.
According to ESPN, they got documents that the NCAA has drafted or created in some way. They may have given it to LSU already. That this is what they found. So
okay,
this is
like a source.
No, I mean it's a source in the sense that like unless someone thinks they forged the documents, like this is what they think, or unless the NCAA is like, that was
that they were
or unless the NCAA says, this was an early draft and we didn't go through it, or we were who knows with these things. But
these are documents obtained by ESPN.
Yes, that are NCAA documents that are, and then the letter I think is right. Like that the letter that was sent to the IARP, that was separate from these documents, right. And
that last term you mentioned there, EJ. Yeah, that last term you mentioned there, the IARP that's the elephant in the room that we don't really know. It's the wild card, I should say, that we don't really know how that's going to play out because it's a new system that the NCAA has kind of adopted that's made it to where like these schools can now go to these independent rulers, and once that happens, you can't appeal. Like whatever you get is what you get. You get what you get, and you don't get upset. It's what the IARP is, and Memphis is going through that with the James Wiseman situation, which again it's ludicrous that like because we played James Wiseman in like 2 games, when he was quote unquote ineligible for the nonsense stuff, like because of that now Memphis is like on the brink of sanctions. It's nonsense. But Kansas is going through it as well with the IARP. And now the latest school to go through that system will be LSU, obviously you look at what Kansas and LSU are going through, probably more severe than what Memphis is going through. You would hope. I mean, but in the NCAA, LSU will probably get they'll probably be on probation while Memphis gets a 3-year ban. But no, look, I think this is alarming for LSU. Shout out to Dick Vitale. Dick Vitale has been every week pretty much pounding the desk. LSU, the sanctions are coming. My source at the NCAA or whoever is telling me that the sanctions are coming for LSU, and LSU fans have been getting at Dick Vitale. They feel like Dick Vitale actually cost them the Musa Cisse commitment because he's been so adamant that sanctions are coming. You do wonder about the Musa Cisse commitment and recruitment, and whether or not the fear of sanctions was or the cloud around the program, whether or not that affected that recruitment. But it's not good. If these things, if LSU comes down with any real sanctions because of this, I don't know if Will Wade can keep his job. Like, he probably needs to get a show cause just based off of the NCAA rule. Like, this should be a Bruce Pearl Tennessee situation. Like, what Bruce Pearl did at Tennessee is half, not even half, it's a quarter of what Will Wade's been accused of doing.
Yeah, that's petty stuff compared to Will Wade.
Yeah, it was petty stuff. Like, oh yeah, he lied about a barbecue with a recruit or something like that. And so, yeah, 2-year show cause. And it was like, well, we got to fire him. And it was a wild situation then. Will Wade, who also, by the way, hasn't done as much as Bruce Pearl did at Tennessee, but Will Wade recruited greatly, but has used, reportedly, a lot of tactics to get those recruits. And those tactics are not going to put the program on probation, not even beyond probation. They're going to put the program probably under severe sanctions. These are what they consider level 1 violations. You don't feel good if you're LSU. You don't feel good if you're the administration. This feels like one of those things where they're just gonna let it ride out until they really have to, until the fire hits. But they're not interested in putting it out beforehand. They're gonna be reactionary rather than proactive.
Yeah, it almost feels like, because the question has been like, how is Will Wade employed? How does he still have a job? And it's a question I've asked a bunch of times. But now I think I may be kind of understanding to take from the acting attorney, U.S. Attorney June Kim, when he was acting U.S. Attorney, or whoever the guy was, the FBI guy who did set the comment. We know your playbook. Yeah, it's some district guy. We got your playbook. I think I may have LSU's playbook. I think we've all, at least now I have it. I don't know if this was their initial plan, but I think we're at the point now where they're like, okay, Will Wade is DOA. He's dead man walking. So do we fire him now without knowing what the circumstances are, and then we get in a fight with how much money we owe him? Or do we just let this joint ride out, keep him there, and then once it becomes very clear this dude is dirty as dirty can be, we could fire him with just cause, he gets no money, and yeah, it will hurt the program that we kept him this long, but at least we keep all this bread.
Yeah.
I feel like that's definitely got to be the play here, because to me, every day he's there, it just makes their case worse. And here the NCAA is saying, look, the reason why we can't even properly investigate this thing is because this dude is obstructing. And, Dawkins said on this documentary that, Will Wade's a gangster. Like, he doesn't care. He's going to kind of flaunt his situation and his power in the NCAA's face. And I think that LSU feels powerless because Will Wade has brought them successful basketball, the most successful basketball they've had at that program in a long time. So, and the outrage towards players getting paid has hit an all-time low amongst the general population. So firing him for paying players just looks bad when you're winning, I think, is their calculation. So saying, okay, well, let's make it to where we have no choice to fire him, and then when we do that, we also will have a great case to say we believed in him, he told us this, he lied to us, and therefore he's not getting any money from us moving forward. That's got to be the playbook, and maybe they're making the case that, look, the sanctions are going to be bad whether we fired him now, whether we fired him last year, or whether we fire him after these sanctions come out. It's not going to be that much discernible difference, so what's the point? And when our case of keeping our money will be better if we fire him after, like, the official sanction, the official charges are out there, and we have the just cause for why Will Wade is fired and defrauded this university, and therefore we can get rid of him after that.
Yeah, I mean, like what you're saying kind of just reminded me of the Kevin Ollie situation at UConn, where like, he got a violation because Ray Allen worked out with a recruit on an official visit, and so they fired him for cause, and he didn't get any money. But Wade probably get the full bag, anyway, regardless. But yeah, I ideally think legally that's the argument that they'll use and that they should use. Now, I mean, look, I think you could probably fire him now for cause, just based off of like the allegations and being able to fulfill your duties I
think there's that one like that little hope that maybe the sanctions aren't that bad, and then maybe we keep him because he's done a great job.
Right. I think Will Wade. That's why they're keeping him. It's not if they didn't like Will Wade, again, like the Kevin Ollie situation.
I don't think they like him. I don't think they like him, but he's useful. Like I think like he clearly he's flaunted his power not just to the NCAA but to the university. He's told them basically screw off when they've asked him about this stuff.
Yeah,
so
he told
and saying I demand you bring me back and reinstate me. Yeah. Like I mean I don't think they like him. I just think that they're in a position where the fans like him and he wins and he's useful to them because he brings them money. So it's like I don't like him, but he's helping us in terms of what we want to do.
That was one of the most bizarre situations in the history of college sports.
I've never seen that before. A guy chastised his own employer.
Yeah,
tell him I demand you get rid of my suspension.
I'm not answering any of your questions. I talked to my lawyer, and he still has a job. He told him, talk to my lawyer. I'm not talking to you. Yeah. And as if, like, again, do you not think the guy's guilty? If you're not guilty, why can't you talk to him? If we're not FBI. So yeah, that was a very bizarre situation. If you're first of all, as John Rothstein likes to say, Will Wade, American gangster. But second of all, you do have to feel bad for Sharif O'Neal because remember, Sharif O'Neal was committed to Arizona. And when that whole situation with DeAndre Ayton and Sean Miller kind of came out, he decommitted and decided to go to UCLA, which was a bad fit. And then Steve Alford gets fired. He decides to transfer from there because he doesn't want to play for Mick Cronin. Now ends up at LSU, which I'll be honest, you kind of knew what you were walking into, so I don't feel that bad. But goes to LSU, and now this is coming out. Is he just gonna ride it out? I feel like he's not going to LSU because of Will Wade. That's my impression.
It's a Shaq thing.
Yeah, this is because of Shaq, and it goes beyond LSU. He's closer to Atlanta on the East Coast, which is where Shaq is now based, so it makes sense. And look, LSU's not like a program we have to worry about, like he could have went to Memphis, but Memphis is always going to try to recruit over him. Like you go to LSU and you can kind of still be the man, or at least be a contributor. So it makes sense. I don't think that he's going to cry over the fact that Will Wade is gone, but it's bizarre. And what happens if they're on our postseason ban? Does he transfer again? Like so again, you feel for that situation, but yeah, it's not a huge shock what's happening at LSU. # American Gangster.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see if Will Wade survives this. I mean, the guy has survived everything. So I'm not putting anything past him. I'm not putting past that he somehow survives even this. But this doesn't look good. This looks like the end is near, and they seem to be set up for just like a ridiculous hammer to be dropped on them. As you said, Dick Vitale has been hinting at that. But we'll see what actually comes down when this happens. But let's move on now to talk about the Kentucky Wildcats. So it's been, as we said, a tumultuous all season for the Kentucky Wildcats, who lost top assistant Kenny Payne, which we talked about on the last show. It's been told. Yeah, even a month. It's been a lot happening. But the team has announced that 2 high-profile coaches will be joining their staff, which is sure to make waves in the recruiting trail. Top assistant for Indiana and former Drexel head coach Brewster Flint will join John Calipari's staff as an assistant coach. Flint was on Calipari's staff at UMass back in the 90s. He also has deep ties to Philadelphia, obviously, where he was born and raised and coached at Drexel for 15 years. Also, Jai Lucas, a former NBA player who spent his post-playing days as an assistant at Texas, has seen there's a big part of the recruitments of players like Mo Bamba,
Did
Jared
Lucas
Allen.
make
What was that?
Lucas ever make the NBA? I don't know. I know
Maybe
his
I
brother
thought he
did.
did. Oh yeah, maybe he didn't. He might not have made the NBA.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah. I mean, he was McDonald's American.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know.
big time, college basketball player. Uh,
Yeah.
anyway, he was at Texas. He was big in the recruitments of Mo Bamba, Jared Allen, Jackson Hayes, and Greg Brown. Obviously, recently just committed to Texas. He now is joining the staff of John Calipari. He will serve as an assistant to the head coach and the school's recruiting coordinator. This news also comes as UK has just earned the commitments of 24/7 Sports top 50 guard Nolan Hickman, and is considered now the new favorites for five-star combo guard Hunter Salas from Nebraska. So, Kendall, are these hires a big deal, little deal, or no deal?
I mean, look, the hires, the Kenny Payne situation, and the subsequent hires of Bruiser Flint. I don't think the Bruiser Flint hire is a big deal. Look, it's a connection. Him and Calipari are close. Gets Bruiser Flint closer to a head coaching job. It gets
Yeah,
him back kind of in the mainstream lexicon of college basketball. Uh, Jai Lucas, I think, could be a big deal. He seemed like a guy that's going to be fast tracked to, being a real player in college basketball on the coaches and in coaching circles. You mentioned the impact he's had at Texas, um, recruiting. Ironically enough, big men, considering he's a guard, but he was a guard. But yeah, I mean, obviously, again, you mentioned the impact he had at Texas. I feel like the Lucas name, it runs deeper in Texas than it does anywhere else, but it still runs pretty deep in basketball regardless. Um, and you pair him with Kentucky, and again, the work he's already done at Texas. Now you pair him with the Kentucky brand and Calipari, and it feels like this could be very, very interesting. And if you're a Kentucky fan, you have to be excited. And I think the one thing that really stood out with the Jai Lucas hire was uh, after he was hired, I looked at his Twitter account. I don't know why. I think I must have ran into it. And I was scrolling through his tweets. He doesn't tweet very much, but I was scrolling through his tweets, and I saw an interesting one from June. It was it was a tweet. It was a retweet of William Wesley, Worldwide West, getting hired by the New York Knicks, and he retweeted it with the caption "Unk," your and with a exclamation point. So you put two and two together. Calipari, Worldwide West, CAA, now Jai Lucas clearly has a good relationship with Worldwide West, looks at him as his uncle, quote unquote. Put two and two together, it makes sense why this connection happened. Whether or not Calipari, I don't know if Calipari had much of a relationship with Jai Lucas prior to this. As much as it is that Jai Lucas had a connection with Worldwide West, who has a connection with Calipari, and that's how that connection happened. It'll be interesting to see where the connections are for Jai Lucas in recruiting, because obviously William Wesley is busy working for the New York Knicks, not going to have the same impact on the recruiting trail that he's had previously, at least I would imagine. And so, will we see the same kind of guys? I mean, I think about even the Jaden Hardy situation, because Jaden Hardy is a guy that, for the longest time, was considered an absolute lock to go to Kentucky. Corey Evans himself said Jaden Hardy is pretty much a, quote, virtual lock to go to Kentucky. And this past week, Corey Evans has moved his crystal ball from Jaden Hardy from Kentucky, for Jaden Hardy from Kentucky to UCLA, of all places. Jaden Hardy, obviously a five-star, top five guard out of Las Vegas. I would say the best guard in this class. It's interesting. I don't know if that's a connection to Kenny Payne and Kenny Payne not being there, and now Jai Lucas and Bruiser Flint coming in, and whether or not that shook up that recruitment. I would imagine so. That would be my guess, is that that's what's happening. And why UCLA now is the favorite is interesting. I don't know why. I can't really speak to that, but Obviously, it's West Coast, so it's closer to home. Even though he's from Detroit, but he's in Vegas now. It's closer to home. But that's a blow to Kentucky. But then you mentioned the Hunter Sallis situation. You could bring in Nolan Hickman, who Nolan Hickman is Kentucky's kind of response to the Kennedy Chandler recruitment. A kid from the West Coast who is going to be playing out in Utah this for his senior season. Very solid point guard. Again, Nolan Hickman, kind of similar to Kennedy Chandler in that he's not a one and done. I don't really even think he should be a starting point guard from day one. But Kentucky isn't really equipped with a one and done point guard right now. Devin Askew is another 5-star point guard that I wouldn't project as a one and done guy. He's going to stay there for 2 or 3 years. So you have him and Nolan Hickman. Nolan Hickman could play the Tyler Ulis role for that 2015 Kentucky team that went to the Final Four and lost to Wisconsin. Remember, Tyler Ulis was probably better than Andrew Harrison, but certainly was a contributor. But he was also a freshman and was a backup. I think Nolan Hickman could be a similar kind of prospect for Calipari, which is why I think he liked him and why he took the commitment. And Hunter Sallis is a big-time guy. He's a guy that's really shooting up a lot of recruiting services in terms of the top 100. Some people have him now in the top 10, top 5. I think
I've seen him in the top 5.
Places, yeah. I think he's a little more developmental than I think your normal top 5 recruit when you think about like a guy. Like I don't think he's going to come in and be a 20-point scorer. But I think like he's similar to BJ Boston, who's also committed to Kentucky or going to Kentucky this season, in that like he's a lot of physical tools, a lot of he's got a skill level mixed with the physical tools that makes you think long term this guy could really be dynamite. In the immediacy, and again, similar like we talked about with Chet Holmgren, maybe all of the skills and physical tools don't match completely right now. Maybe it's still a little raw, but a year from now, could he be the best guard in the class? Could he be better than Jaden Hardy? Absolutely. Jaden Hardy is better right now in terms of just skill level. I mean, he's a guy that's put up 60 in games in high school and is just an elite scorer of the most elite acclaim. But Hunter Sallis, better athlete, better physical profile. So it's going to be interesting. But Kentucky, it was, again, like you said, a very wild month for Kentucky basketball. I've said a lot here, but ultimately, I think Kentucky fans should breathe a sigh of relief after the, departure of Kenny Payne. Obviously, you may lose out on Jaden Hardy now, which is tough because that was the guy they were going to build their class around. But you replace that with Nolan Hickman and Hunter Sallis, and you hope that you can get Pat Baldwin, which would be a rebound and quite the message to Coach K. All right, you can get Banchero. I'll go and get your guy Pat Baldwin. So it'll be interesting how this all plays out. But Kentucky, they'll be fine. They'll continue to get 5 stars as long as Calipari's there. Jai Lucas should certainly help with that.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I wanted to quickly read Cal's statement on Jai Lucas because he talks about how he's known the Lucas family for a long time. He said, "I've known the Lucas family for 25 years and followed Jai's career both as a player and as a coach. And as our fans know, Jai was recruited here as a player. And he knows a lot about this program. I've always been impressed by the work he has done and the relationships he's created. Jai is another guy who everyone has respect for because of his work ethic and his players first approach. He will be a great addition." So there, Cal's kind of connecting his dad and him recruiting him as a player to this hire, and we'll see if their relationship is able to be solid, obviously, with Jai coming on as an assistant coach and a recruiting coordinator. In regards to how this shapes up with some of the other shifting and moving with Jaden Hardy and Sky Clark, it's
Sky Clark. We didn't even mention him.
Because Sky Clark also now looking like North Carolina lean, according to Rivals Corey Evans, who says I think recently Sky had a conversation with Roy Williams on a Zoom call. Apparently went very well. Now North Carolina is looking like the front runner there. I'll be honest. I think Cal, looked at the situation. We talked about it on this podcast that, Kentucky was just not getting the players they were. I'm not saying he wanted Kenny Payne out the door, but I think once Kenny Payne, the opportunity came, and knowing Cal, I bet you he told Kenny to take that job. That's just kind of how he is. I think he kind of looked at this, though, as a time to maybe retool and say, look, things just aren't like they were. You know what I'm saying? And I know we have some guys that look like they're leaning us and they're top players, and that's great. But maybe we just kind of need to shake things up a little bit. And could that hurt relationships with certain kids that we thought we had? Maybe. But if there's anybody that could absorb that, it's me. You know, and he would be right in the sense that if there's anybody that could absorb a little bit of a shakeup here and there, it's him. He could turn around and get a top 10 guy tomorrow, and nobody would lose sleep or be surprised because it's Cal. So I think that him saying, look, let me grab Bruiser, Philly. I think we've seen Philly high school basketball really rise, I think, in the last 4 or 5 years. I feel like the players coming out of the Philly suburbs and the city of Philadelphia right now it's hot. It's a hotbed of talent.
Super hot. I mean, next year, the 2022 class, I mean, Roman Catholic High School in Philly, I mean, obviously we talked about, 2021, Jalen Worley is going to Florida State and Rushul Diggins is going to UConn. But in 2022, John Camden, another wing out of the PA area, is also really good. But 2022, Jalen Duran is the number 2 player in the country, straight from Philadelphia, went to Roman Catholic High School. His teammate is William Guard at Roman Catholic, top 20 player in the country. They both transferred to Montverde, which is a blow to the Philadelphia basketball community, but doesn't dispute the fact that those guys have ties to the city.
Of course.
I'm sure Bruiser Flint has ties to those guys potentially, if not straight recruiting through AAU coaches, through high school coaches. Could they now be involved with those guys? Derek Whitehead, another 5-star from New Jersey. Like, Bruiser Flint has been in that area, obviously, for decades. So this is going to be that. It will have that impact.
Exactly. And then also Bruiser, losing Kenny Payne. Kenny Payne wasn't just a recruiter. Kenny Payne was very, instrumental in the player development and coaching, actually, as well. And Bruiser, a long time, very good college basketball head coach. You add some X and O's also to your bench as well. So Bruiser makes a lot of sense. He didn't have as much of a recruiting role at Indiana, despite the fact that they got some big time players. But they may use those Philly ties with some of those kids that you have coming up. And then you add Jai Lucas, and he is your ace recruiter, your big time beast on the trail. And again, the ties he has in Texas is just, come on, the Lucas family is royalty. So I like what Kentucky's doing, and again, it may shake up some of the guys they were looking at, but they needed a shake up, and I think that Kentucky, I think this is a big deal, and I asked little deal, small, I think this is a big deal. I think that Cal, I'm not saying he listened to our show, but I think he's heard the whispers that, where is Kentucky? Are they still the one and done factory? Are they still the place to go? It just hasn't, for at the lack of a better term, just hasn't been as lit there for a while now, and we've talked about it a bunch. But do I think that Jai Lucas could help a great deal? Absolutely. Do I think Bruiser Flint and his ties to Philly can help a big deal with the players coming out of Philly? Absolutely. And I think Bruiser Flint is just a great addition, just period, because he's a really good head coach. Yeah. So I think if you're a Kentucky fan, the Hardy stuff and the Sky Clark stuff may definitely be a little alarming, but I'd say have some patience. I know for Kentucky fans, not the most patient bunch, but I'd say have a little patience. You don't need patient that long. I think it may just be a couple months, and things may turn around very quickly. I think that it's going to be very fascinating to see what happens down in Kentucky. They became more interesting to me this week than they have in a long time. And I know they're Kentucky, but it's just, I kind of felt like they were kind of just going through the motions, even though they were Kentucky.
And a lot of Kentucky fans,
this is a change. These are potential difference makers.
Yeah, a lot of Kentucky fans, a lot of people around the program wanted Orlando Antigua back. Antigua coming from Illinois has done a great job at Illinois. Obviously,
unbelievable job at Illinois.
Top 5, top 10 recruiting class. The program that's even dead. Once they brought Antigua in, all of a sudden now they've become a factory. I don't know how that happened, but regardless, they thought, can we get him back? And I think that would have been interesting. I don't know if Antigua would have left or not, but this is new. This is something different. This connects them to guys that they haven't been connected to before. Again, Hunter Salas, exactly. Nebraska, Texas, not that far. Do you feel like Jai Lucas probably had already recruited Hunter Salas, maybe had a relationship with him prior? Possibly. Hunter Sallis has an interesting list. A lot of West Coast schools, even your Gonzaga Bulldogs were on that list or are on that list. It shows you, man. Mark Few is really trying to push the boundaries. I mean, Hunter Sallis, just watches games, so he doesn't scream Gonzaga basketball.
He's trying to, man. My guy Few is trying to get a ring. He's trying to get a ring. Man. He's been so close.
Holmgren.
He's been so close. He's like, I gotta get this ring, man. I'm the best coach now. Now that Bennett's got one, I'm the best coach in college basketball. Doesn't have one, and he's trying to get one. Thank you all for listening in and watching this edition of the Uncommitted podcast. Of course, you can catch all of our Uncommitted episodes on the New Generation Podcast Network. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and TuneIn, along with, of course, our video editions, which are posted on YouTube every month. Also, be sure to check out our social media. We're on Twitter, New Generation Pod, on Instagram, New Generation Podcast, and on Facebook, New Generation Media. You can find me on Twitter, EJ_Stewart, and on Instagram, ActionEJ. That does it for now. Thank you guys for listening. For Kendall, I'm EJ. Take it easy, guys. Peace.